13,000 years after the last dire wolf walked the Earth, scientists say they've now brought them back.
The dire wolf that comes back from extinction.
A creature from the Ice Age opened its eyes in a world that was never meant to hold it.
Creating 3 dire wolves.
We have 2 boys, Romulus and Remus, and then we have Khaleesi, who's the new girl.
What started with a few old bones and computer-built DNA soon made scientists question whether extinction is truly permanent. And to see why this moment matters, we need to return to the world that created the dire wolf. The world that lost the dire wolf. 13,000 years ago, the plains of North America carried a tension that could be felt in every shifting shadow, because vast herds of ancient horses and bison moved across grasslands while predators tracked their migrations with patient precision. Among them stood the dire wolf, a heavier, broader-jawed hunter whose power came not only from size, but from the cooperative intelligence that defined its pack. Fossils reveal jaws built to crush bone, shoulders shaped for endurance, and a social structure capable of bringing down prey far larger than themselves, which allowed the species to thrive even as climates oscillated between cold and warming intervals. Yet the world supporting these hunters began to erode when megafauna populations collapsed, ecosystems unraveled, and the boundary between survival and extinction narrowed. As prey vanished, the dire wolf's evolutionary advantages became liabilities, and the species slipped into the fossil record, leaving only scattered remains buried in asphalt pits, river terraces, and sheltered rock basins. In time, the animal transformed from a biological reality into a symbol of deep prehistory, resurfacing mostly in stories, museum cases, and the imaginations of artists who tried to reconstruct a predator no living human had ever seen. This long silence surrounding the species created an atmosphere of intrigue, prompting modern researchers to wonder whether ancient predators might tell us something valuable about evolution, ecosystems, and the genetic forces that shape survival. Those questions eventually grew into a scientific ambition unlike anything attempted before. From fossils to blueprint. The attempt to reconstruct a creature from the Ice Age began with objects so small and weathered that they seemed incapable of carrying any scientific promise. Yet, a 72,000-year-old ear bone from Idaho and a 13,000-year-old tooth from Ohio contained the faint molecular echoes researchers needed. Ancient DNA rarely survives as intact strands. Instead, it breaks into short, damaged fragments shaped by temperature, soil chemistry, and time. These fragments behave like incomplete sentences from a language no longer spoken, requiring scientists to reconstruct meaning through comparison, probability, and an understanding of how related genomes evolve. Paleogeneticists began by extracting the brittle DNA and sequencing every recoverable piece, even if some fragments were too degraded to immediately identify. Machine learning algorithms then examined the broken code, searching for patterns that aligned with modern canid genomes, while correcting age-related mutations that would otherwise distort the ancient signal. Through iterations of statistical modeling, researchers gradually rebuilt sections of the dire wolf's genetic architecture, creating a blueprint detailed enough to identify traits linked to body size, coat thickness, skull morphology, and metabolic adaptations. Once the reconstruction reached a level of confidence deemed biologically actionable, attention shifted to the living cells needed to carry the edits. Scientists isolated progenitor cells from a modern gray wolf and used CRISPR systems to insert the extinct variants precisely where the ancestral genome suggested they belonged. Each edit required verification to ensure the cell would express the trait as intended, without causing instability, and the cumulative achievement marked a milestone in vertebrate gene engineering. With embryos formed and surrogates prepared, the project transitioned from data and laboratory equipment into the realm of living biology, setting the stage for an event that merged Ice Age heritage with 21st century technology. Birth of an impossible creature. When the first surrogate neared delivery, the atmosphere inside the facility shifted into a focused stillness because every researcher understood that years of reconstruction, editing, and verification would soon manifest as a living organism. The embryos had developed normally inside domestic hound mixes, whose physiology proved stable enough to support the edited genome, Yet no one could predict precisely how the pups would appear once they entered the world. During the planned surgical delivery, the team watched as the first pup emerged with a coat noticeably denser than that of any newborn domestic dog, and its broad skull shape immediately hinted at traits drawn from genetic patterns not expressed for thousands of years. As the pups grew, the speed of their transformation revealed the power of the edited genome. Their bones elongated rapidly, their shoulders thickened, and their jaws developed a width and curvature associated with extreme bite forces documented in dire wolf fossils. By 6 months of age, the males approached the mass and proportion as expected of an apex predator, rather than a domestic companion, which astonished observers who expected a slower maturation timeline. Behavioral traits surfaced just as quickly, since the pups displayed an instinctive wariness that contrasted sharply with the sociability typical of dogs reared by humans. They preferred dim spaces, monitored movement with intense focus, and adopted coordinated stalking postures long before formal behavioral assessments began. One early moment left an impression that circulated widely among the staff. When a veterinary technician sang a melodic phrase to soothe them, the pups lifted their heads and produced a resonant howl that carried a tonal depth described in fossil studies of Ice Age canids. This response suggested that the genetic architecture governing vocalization had been reactivated successfully, reinforcing the idea that these animals embodied more than reconstructed appearance. Their existence signaled a transition from theoretical possibility to living consequence. The identity crisis. As the pups matured, scientific excitement gradually intertwined with uncertainty, because researchers across multiple disciplines began questioning how these animals should be classified. Critics argued that although the edited pups displayed impressive physical and behavioral similarities to dire wolves, their foundational genome originated from modern gray wolves, which introduced a philosophical tension regarding authenticity. Evolutionary biologists emphasized that dire wolves and gray wolves diverged millions of years ago, creating independent lineages with distinct ecological histories. Therefore, replacing select gene variants could not fully replicate the evolutionary pressures that shape the extinct species. This viewpoint framed the pups as highly engineered canids rather than genuine resurrected predators. Supporters countered with a different conceptual lens by invoking the morphological species framework, which prioritizes ecological function and observable traits rather than pure genetic lineage. If an organism behaves like its ancient counterpart, fills a comparable ecological role, and reliably passes traits that mimic ancestral characteristics, then its classification becomes a matter of functional identity rather than genetic purity. This argument suggested that synthetic biology had created a new category of organism, one that bridged ancient phenotype with modern genomic infrastructure. Ethicists contributed an additional layer of concern by questioning the long-term welfare of animals engineered for traits suited to vanished ecosystems. The pups lived in a fortified preserve designed to ensure safety, yet their instincts aligned with environments that no longer existed, raising questions about enrichment, autonomy, and ecological purpose. Conservationists asked whether dedicating resources to recreating extinct predators detracted from efforts to protect species currently nearing collapse. These debates converged into a broader conversation about how society defines resurrection, which set the stage for discoveries that later challenged both sides of the argument. The unexpected proof of concept. Debate over the pup's identity gained new dimension when researchers revisited a breakthrough that predated the dire wolf project but carried profound implications for its legitimacy. In 2023, geneticists studying permafrost-preserved material from a 2 million-year-old mammoth relative succeeded in inserting reconstructed ancient genes into living elephant cells. Observing those dormant traits activate measurable biological responses. The experiment demonstrated that extinct genetic functions could influence modern cellular behavior despite immense evolutionary distance, which contradicted earlier assumptions that ancient DNA would be too degraded to carry usable instructions. This finding circulated quietly within scientific circles, yet reshaped internal confidence at laboratories attempting de-extinction work, because it provided empirical evidence that traits belonging to long-lost species could be revived in living organisms. For the team developing the dire wolf, this discovery validated the premise underlying their entire endeavor, If genes older than any known species of modern canid could regain function inside the cells of a contemporary animal, then editing Ice Age variants into gray wolf progenitor cells was not speculative fantasy, but a logical extension of established cellular behavior. The mammoth gene study supported the possibility that phenotype, instinct, and even certain physiological adaptations might re-emerge when ancient genomic architecture was restored with sufficient accuracy. As this realization gained traction, hesitation surrounding the Dire Wolf project shifted into guarded optimism, because researchers now had precedent showing that the past could imprint itself onto modern biology in ways previously considered unreachable. This insight reframed the pups not as isolated anomalies, but as early representatives of a broader scientific frontier that linked ancient inheritance with contemporary conservation strategies. Ghost alleles and the red wolf rescue. While global attention centered on the striking appearance of the engineered pups, a quieter development unfolded within conservation circles because the same technology used to reconstruct dire wolf traits was redirected toward a species facing imminent disappearance. Fewer than 20 American red wolves remained in the wild, and their survival was threatened not only by habitat loss, but by a genetic bottleneck that limited their ability to adapt to diseases, climate pressures, and long-term ecological instability. Traditional breeding programs could not restore genetic diversity that no longer existed in the population, which left conservationists searching for solutions beyond conventional methods. Scientists turned to an unexpected resource: traces of ancestral red wolf DNA preserved in the genomes of coastal canids. These ghost alleles, invisible in appearance yet detectable through genomic analysis, represented fragments of lost diversity that had persisted in hybrid lineages even after the pure red wolf population collapsed. By adapting the non-invasive cloning and gene editing tools refined during the Dire Wolf project, researchers introduced embryos carrying these rare ancestral variants into surrogate mothers, successfully producing litters that reintroduced crucial genetic material into the species. This achievement demonstrated that de-extinction technologies were not solely instruments of recreation, but powerful mechanisms for preventing future extinctions. Instead of restoring an Ice Age predator for symbolic or scientific curiosity, the tools developed for that purpose directly contributed to strengthening a critically endangered species, which reframed the broader narrative around synthetic biology and its potential role in ecological recovery. Every step toward rebuilding these ancient traits reminds us that extinction is no longer an irreversible boundary, but a responsibility shaped by choice, knowledge, and restraint. If this journey inspires deeper curiosity, consider subscribing and joining future explorations into the past, present, and future of life on our changing planet.